Okay, I have prepared my canvas. This is a board, and I've got cotton canvas that I mounted on it, primed, and to my own mix I use a bit of gesso and acrylic primer, and I prime it, and I've got my mix so that the canvas is not too absorbent, but also my paint won't just slide around. So, and then I did the sketch and I fixed it with, you can use fixative, but sometimes it makes your canvas a bit more slippery. So I used the acrylic, and I just established my sketch so that I don't lose it. I'm going to just do two simple little boats lying, and then the sea and almost a skyscape. Try and make the sky look very interesting, and let's see how quick I can do that. So I'm going to, for a start, block in the boats, because they are the only objects that is really horizontal on my picture, and the light is coming almost from straight above. So most of the boats will be in the shade. So I will first use burnt sienna. Okay, now I mixed some burnt sienna and French ultramarine, which is my greys, most of my greys and black. So I'm blocking in the boat first. This is going to be the darkest spot on my painting. There's a net hanging over the boat here, so I'll just indicate the dark behind the net. It makes my life much easier. The paints I'm using is a local South African make. They got their factory in Hermanus. A lot of people don't like to use of my friends, they don't like to use Zelen, because they would rather go for more expensive, glamorous, more expensive imports. Okay, and that is the dark part, and then I'm going to have a dark piece here. There's all junk on these boats, and it's everything one can use to make them look interesting. Then I'm rinsing my brush now in turbs, and I'm going to do the other dark. Now once I've got the darks, then it's easier to establish midtones and highlights. So this now I'm going to use burnt sienna with a bit of alizarin crimson. This part's going to be red, but not too bright, because I don't want it to vibrate with the blue. And then it will, little bit of water that gets past here, it will reflect. Okay, now I can define the inside part of the boat, which helps me establish also the curve. and that is so characteristic of boats, is their curve. Boats never stand or sit on top of the water or the land. They lie. They're lazy things. They really lie. And if you don't get that illusion right, then your boats will never look trust, accurate, or believable. So what I'm doing is just now establish the warmer colors and the darks on the boat, and now I'm going to use a bit of violet and do the white strips on the boat. It looks like white in the shadow. Of course, we never use pure white on a painting. It's always a tint or a tone. In other words, a broken shadow, even though the local color may be white, but when you paint it, you've got to create an illusion that there's shade and light. You see, by doing the sketch in acrylic, which is also Zelen acrylic, Zelcryl they call it, I've learned to work with these pigments and I quite enjoy them. And they're a fraction of the price of other coloring. Missed one. I'm getting it a little bit more established as far as the form is concerned, with a bit of darker and lighter color. It doesn't really matter how. Just adjust my sketch slightly. That curve wasn't quite right. Now get a bit of depth, and okay, I can do a bit of detail later. Now I'm going to, well, remembering that this layer of paint I just put here, it's very thin. It's like more than a wash, not even quite a glaze, but a wash. And but I'll remember that it is still fairly fresh and wet. So colors that I put on now will smear if I go across that. So I'm going to use, I rinsed it in tips. I'm going to use the same brush. By the way, this is a number 6, and I'm going to paint almost the entire picture with these two brushes. This is a size 6, half round or filbert, and this is a size 12, half round or filbert. And they rock there, so they're fairly firm, and I can use them very gentle, or I can press them or scumble them, because the hair is fairly rigid. So I can load thick paint and put a nice thick strip there if I like. So I'm going to now do a little bit of cobalt blue. This is a genuine cobalt blue, and I'm putting a little bit of Terra Verde, which is a green that's not quite as bright as Viridian. Viridian can be quite dangerous, and I'm going to start blocking in the sea. First I'll do in the distance. You can see this broken blue-green, which is more towards blue. Is a harmony to the orangey color of the boats, but it's also going to create a bit of a contrast, so that I have got that boats standing out, the boats which are my subject. So I'll go slightly more green, and add a bit of white. It's not a good idea if you're fairly young in your career to paint. Not a very good idea to just use white early. Most of the time I don't put white on my palette until I get to the last layer or two. I'm still applying quite a bit of pressure on the brush. I'm going to use a bit of a color here, which only Zelen, this is a very particular color to Zelen, Zelball. It's brilliant orange, gives you a nice, lovely, lively peach. It is more brilliant than cadmium orange. By the way, they also make their cadmiums from the real pigment, as well as cobalt blue and a few others, and it still remains very affordable. So the orange is complementary to the blue. I must get it fairly soft so that it's like a greyed down orange and blue. And then I will use a bit of raw sienna. I didn't put it on the palette right from the start. As I go along, sometimes change my mind about something and would get the then put the paint down. Now this raw sienna is totally translucent, and it's a very rich color. Beautiful, one of the best that I've seen from all different color men. Okay, there is some light coming through on the water, where the sunlight is heating it slightly, and it just gives me a bit of a variation to make it look more interesting. This is very basic. At the moment I'm just putting the underpainting, and I don't really need to be too careful. Now I can use a bit more green. The Terra Verde, I am going to make it slightly more interesting here. It's mixing with the raw sienna, and that I don't mind. And then in the foreground is going to be a bit dark shadows here between sand and sea and water that's spilling over, washing over the beach. And so I've got to use a bit of orange and burnt sienna mixed, and it's beginning to look like it's lying in on the sand on the beach. Right, I'm going to put me a bit of grey there. Now this is a different kind of paint. Friend of mine, artist friend Joe Hubert, he makes these pigments, makes his paint himself, and he calls this one a stibnite light grey. It is a little bit warmer than the other one, which is also darker, that I'll use just now. And it usually I mix all my greys with the raw sienna, the burnt sienna and the French ultramarine, but this makes life easier. It's a very natural looking grey. I can, where I've worked with the sketch with the acrylic, I can go over that, it won't get lost. And just to demonstrate, I'll use a little bit of the antimonite grey, which is a darker one, and it is a little bit cooler than the stibnite. paint is more solid now. That was the antimonite grey, and with this one I'm going to mix a little bit of the stibnite to make it just a little bit slighter and warmer. For variation, this is catching a little bit of reflection, so it's just about lighter, hardly a degree. And I'm putting thicker paint on the subject itself now. Now I want to take some of that grey, add a bit of this and crimson to it. Remember, the boat curves in. It's wider at the top than at the bottom, so I do a little bit darker at the bottom than at the top. I can just give it a bit of life with some loose brush strokes. Okay, so the subject and the foreground, the underpainting's finished, and even some places there was some spots which I will just leave like that. And now I'm going to take a bigger brush for the sky. This is a hog's hair brush, but this is really a primer brush, priming brush. It's hog's hair though, and there's no more hair falling out. So to work quickly, I can use this brush, block in the sky quicker, and I somehow get a looser effect, brush effect. And I will now use some of the grey. I'll scoop some of this painting medium just to make it a little bit softer, spread easier. Then I mix myself a pastel like grey. Fits in beautifully with all those. I'm going to need a slightly darker piece there, so I'll just do that. Okay, then I just wet my brush with the painting medium, and it applies so nicely, a beautiful grey. Put a little bit of purple there, just for variation. You can hardly see it, but in the final product it will make a difference. taking the warmer grey now, which is the stibnite grey, as he calls it, and I will put some areas, block it in with that. Won't clean my brush, because most of the paint was left on the, that becomes very soft. And then I'm going to put a little bit of lighter cloud on the left. Take a little bit of that brilliant orange and go mix it with the grey. If you've ever noticed, or you look at clouds again, you'll find that there's never any pure white in a cloud. I know some of the old masters, some people used to criticize Constable for using white. They called it Constable snow. And actually in a little bit of a derogatory manner, but he was an excellent artist. Okay, and now I want a bit of light blue. Take some cobalt blue. Genuine cobalt is a color that when one sees mountains in a distance, it usually appears like a bluish color. That is because it's in a distance and the effect that the atmosphere has on it. The mountain may in fact be covered in foliage and trees and stuff, but we will see the hint of blue, suggestion of blue. Now cobalt blue is the closest. One can, in certain situations, use the cobalt blue pure as it is, and it will appear like a mountain. This is a bit light still for it, but as I go towards the horizon, it gets slightly more luminous, lighter. This is the way I love to paint, with a brush that looks slightly too big for what you're trying to do. And it gives me a little bit of a more loose, natural feel for the picture. I am now beginning to mix all the different greys and the lights and the blues and a bit of orange that I mixed, and a little bit of this orange and white, and this is wet into wet, so if I hold my brush like this, then I can load it and leave the paint on top on the surface, so that whatever's behind it can still shine through. And even mix it with some of the other colors. I want it to look interesting, because the sky is the bigger part of my painting, and that's usually the case when you do landscapes or seascapes. The sky sometimes becomes the dominant area of your painting. Okay, now I'm going to go to a medium or the size 12 brush and do some second layer work on the sea and the distance. So the variation, and the color is coming closer to the sky now. Use the half round, not only like this, sometimes turning it sideways, and one can draw fairly thin streak or light line with it. Add a bit of green there. Go repeat this in the sky. Because after all, whether I do a landscape or seascape, they should marry. The sky and the sea, or the landscape and the sea, should marry. I call it marry because they should complement one another and the colors should be repeated. I am now taking white, and I didn't clean my brush after I used that green, and I put some raw sienna. Raw sienna is not a very strong mixing color, so I begin to put a little bit of movement, more movement in the water. And on the beach. And just now we can maybe enhance a little bit of a type of a reflection effect. A little bit of it repeat in the sky. And it's beginning to look very colorful now. Okay, now I'll go back to the size 6, a smaller brush, and put thicker paint on my subject. And because the background is much darker than when I started the boats, I have to now make it slightly more solid. bring it closer. Create the illusion that there's some light reflecting, even though that boat is mostly in the shade. A bit more raw sienna. One can use the harmonies like purple and yellow. Use the harmonies to grey down and yet to one or the other side still create a local colour or suggested colour by greying it down. Just the suggestion of a net hanging over the side of the boat, and I'll put a tiny bit of cadmium yellow, pale, make it a cooler yellow, and then give it a bit of life, make it very light. Just to give you an idea, this on the boat may appear white now, but look how far away it is from white. Got a very good opportunity here to enhance. Put a kind of a spot, a focal point almost. Make that very light. So that contrast, immediately it changes that whole setup there. And then I just got to repeat it on this side, so that it doesn't look like it's just there. And then here I can put also a bit of sunlight. Okay, now I'm going to begin to round off my subject here, and I will use grey. Remember, the verticals on the picture is the darker part of the picture. And if we got trees, telephone poles, they'll always have a darker edge because the light's catching them either from the side and throwing a dark shadow on the other side, or the sun is not hitting it at all. I took some of the dark grey now antimonite grey, and now I want to draw this line here, so I can use this as a marl stick. It's a bit short, I think. But I can use it from the side. Or hang it like this. Just make it look interesting. I can take a rigger and with some of the brilliant orange, yellow and white, put me a few highlights on it. Actually, easier to use a palette knife. I do this for a living, paint, and I'm also a musician. I was one professional musician for a long time, where the art was taking second place, and later years it switched around. So if you enjoyed this video, you can perhaps just consider subscribing. Costs nothing, and liking and subscribing, even sharing the video. I want to put a bit of more thicker paint and life here. Make this a bit darker so that the highlight can stand out a bit more. Also make it look slightly neater. And then I will take a small thin brush so I get so many in here that sometimes I battle to find them, and some of them have seen better days. May as well use the 6. Pensiona, French ultramarine. That's my black. Okay, now it's just a little bit of highlights on that net which I'm supposed to have hanging there. And for all practical purposes, I think my picture is, for now it's done. When it's dry, I may put another few marks on it. Thank you very much for watching, and please subscribe. Thank you.